Looks like yes. Okay.
Okay.
Cool. Right. Welcome everyone to Virtual DDD, the October edition. Today we're here to listen to Gien, pronounced that correctly, talking about slow down to speed up your decision making. Before we proceed to our main bill, I'd like to make sure that you all know about our Discord and our social in general. Also, I'd like to invite you to come over to this board. Generally, here we do, like, if you want to add comments or questions or anything that will kind of remain for posterity, or maybe you really like a screenshot, this is a good place to drop it. We've been doing this for the last few months, and it's been quite nice to have this free format. If you want to chat, the Discord server is great for that. We're trying to move away from meetup.com because of it's been becoming quite expensive and also quite spammy, really. And so we are moving to Humanitics. So if you haven't, please visit this place, visit Virtual DDD, and you'll see that how to sign up for tickets is, yeah, like if you go here, RSVP on Humanitics. So if you go to more info, Humanitics is how you can RSVP and also follow us there, which is nice. Does anyone have any questions about Move or the community in general on how it works? Like all the changes we're making to make this better? Good decision. Thank you. I'm glad that you
about that after the talk. So we'll see about that after the talk.
Oh, yes, this is a decision. Absolutely. I'd love to hear about our heuristics, if they were correct, or if we should have done something else. So, moving on forward, generally, just in case you care about me, I'm Andrea, I'm your host. If you want to talk to me, that's how. Some interesting events in Oakland, in Berlin, and in Melbourne. Again, you have access to this board. So if you have some nice events that we haven't mentioned, please let us know. And without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to invite Gien to do her talk.
Yes.
Thank you.
I will start sharing my screen. All right, I think this is working.
Yes.
All right. As I mentioned to Andrea, I won't be able to see the Google Meetup while I do this, but please yell or interrupt if you have questions that can't wait until the end, or if there are any technical problems, basically. So this talk is called Slow Down to Speed Up Your Decision Making. Originally, I was going to call it Kubernetes is not going to solve your problem, but I changed it because, one, that's maybe not fair to Kubernetes, and two, I was a bit afraid that people would assume I would be talking about alternatives to Kubernetes, which I'm not going to do today. I'm going to talk a bit more about decision making. What is a decision? What's the problem? All that kind of stuff. So for those who don't know me, my name is Gien Verschatse. I'm from Belgium. You can find me on Blue Sky and Mastodon and LinkedIn. Feel free to connect. I work for a company called Aardling, where I'm a consultant that specialized in architecture and domain modeling. And one of my hobbies is digging into decision making. I used to say it got a bit out of hand because I sort of wrote a book about it. I'm now doing full-blown talks about it. So I think it's safe to say that it's getting gigantically out of hand. So I want to start with a story at one of my customers. I was there and I had gone on holiday and I came back and they informed me that actually they were going to swap from Scrum to Kanban. I was like, okay. Why are you trying to do that? And he was like, yeah, right now it takes way too long to finish our features. Kanban will be better. And one of the things, one of the first things I sort of gently had to make clear is that this unfortunately will not solve your problem, because we've been digging into it for a bit. And basically there were two main reasons why it was taking a lot of time right now. And the first one was team alignment. So they had to work with different teams, and each team had their own roadmap and their own priorities, and they just did not match up with one another, which basically meant that if you were developing a certain feature and you were dependent on another team, that team had that in the backlog. They were not even thinking about it, so you had to constantly put it on hold, and the other teams had to start figuring out how they were going to do it way ahead of their schedule, things like that. So it was a big sort of misalignment there. And the second reason it wasn't really, they couldn't go faster, was because of the code reviews. Now, I have nothing against code reviews, but they are very blocking in the cycle. So I tried to dig a bit deeper about why do you have these code reviews here, and why does it take so long for them to actually finish? And when I do this exercise, what do you hope to get out of a code review? I always get a bunch of things which I think are very valuable to do. People want to validate their IDs. They want to get an extra pair of eyes, not to have bugs. They want to make sure that what they build is actually well tested. They want to stay in touch with the code base to know the features, even if they're not working on them. And then last, they want to have someone validate the structure and style. Now, for all those things, the only thing a code review is really good at is sort of validating structure and style. And you may disagree with that, because all companies do code reviews very differently and see them differently. But for me, testing is not really part of a code review. It should be either done separately, or sometimes you have QA teams or something. But doing code reviews to make sure that your code is tested is not the way I like to work. Secondly, if you want to validate your ID, when you do that at the point of a code review, you're at the end of the cycle, which means that you already have a solution, everything is already done. And to then start criticizing the design, which would mean you have to basically restart, it's not the right point in time to actually do that. And there are other ways also to stay in touch with the code base, which is more of a team thing. Like you could do mob programming or pair programming. You then can do code reading practices. And said, so the reason why it takes so long is because you expect a lot from a code review. You're also working very async. So there's a lot of that we can move out, and we can solve it in a different way. And your code reviews will be more efficient. But at the end of the day, just going from Scrum to Kanban, it will not solve this problem of taking too long to actually have a feature in production. And this is something that I often see at companies, that they sort of try to solve a problem, but they don't understand the problem very well, or they assume they understand the problem, or they have a solution which they hope will solve the problem. And so they sort of say the problem is the current solution that they use, because Scrum and Kanban are very much solutions to a problem. And swapping to a different solution, it will fix all of that magically. And that's just unfortunately not true. So one of the things I noticed is that the hardest part of solving problems is actually understanding the problem. It's understanding what exactly is it that we're solving. It's also the part where we spend the least amount of time on. And so I'm trying to change that, mostly because I go to companies to redesign, and there's often a bit of a fire, so it has to go fast. But we also need time to sort of spend on the problem, on that redesigning. And one of the things I noticed is how we state the problem. We often talk about we need to move to microservices. Should we use SQL or event sourcing? Do we move to Kanban? How do we introduce domain-driven design into the company? And all of these things are basically solutions to the problem, and we're not focused on the problem. Okay? So I want to give you some tools and techniques today that will allow you to spend a bit more time in that problem and the problem statement, and in analyzing the problem, then hoping you will have a better way of making decisions. And as the title says, at the beginning, this will slow you down because you need to learn all these new tools and techniques to begin with, and also spending more time in the problem means you get to the outcome a lot later. But in the end, it will speed up the way you make decisions in the company, and you will have better results. So the first thing I always ask myself when I go into a company and they present a problem is this actually a problem? Because not everything is a problem. We also have something called a polarity. And what is a polarity? It's basically ongoing issue or a challenge that has no clear solution. And often you have two sides of it, which makes it a polarity because they seem to contradict each other also a bit. But you can't just solve it and move on. For example, if we look at local versus global complexity, that is a polarity which we need to manage. We can't pick local complexity over global complexity and just move on when we're designing our software, because that will not give us good solutions. Another one is team versus individual. We can look at individual effectiveness of a person. We can also look at team effectiveness. The sad part is that just the sum of individual effectiveness does not determine the team effectiveness. If we go back to code reviews, that's something that's more on the side of team, while if we're implementing a feature, very often we do that alone. It's more on the side of individual. So we need to find a balance between making sure that an individual is comfortable in doing their job and making sure that the team still performs. I'm not going to dig into polarities today because we do have tools and techniques to manage that. I want to focus on the problem. And so then I ask people, what can you do with a problem? And I always get the same answer, and is, well, you solve a problem. It was like, but that's not the only thing that you can do with it. You can make a problem irrelevant as well, which is a very tricky thing to do, but it can be done. So besides solving it, you can always make it irrelevant. And this basically means that we're looking at this very small thing in the problem. We say, well, if we broaden it, what exactly of the context can we change so that this problem just isn't relevant anymore? A very good example, which is often used when we talk about critical thinking, in which this topic sort of leads into, is the fact that a company struggled with slow elevators. And so everyone was trying to see how can we make the elevators move faster. While someone else from a different department actually came up with the idea to put mirrors next to the elevators, because people like looking at themselves, apparently, and then they don't notice time that much anymore. And so they didn't notice that the elevators were slow. So the elevators were in essence still slow, but it became irrelevant that problem actually was there. These are two examples of this problem I actually saw in the wild. One hotel made a variety of jokes about it, and the elevator was freakishly slow, but I was laughing and I didn't really care about it. And the other one sort of pimped the elevator. There was a good beat there as well. So it was kind of fun to just stand in that elevator and The fact that it was very slow became irrelevant. So that is something that we actually can do. Not that easy, but it is possible. But let's say that we want to solve it, because that's what we do with most problems, is sometimes we just simply can't make it irrelevant. And a lot of times when we have talking about software systems, we can't really do that, but still wanted to let you know that the option is there. So I dug a bit into what is the problem, what do we have, and I found a few very interesting models that also helps me see how I'm going to move forward with how I'm going to actually solve this problem, how I'm going to do this. So the first one is a model that sort of gives you 4 categories. The first one is simplistic, meaning that there's only one answer and it's determined by a fact. If we look at questions like what if F#, that's just a fact and we can give a statement and it's done. Then we also have deterministic, which is there's also only one answer, but it's determined by a formula. If we look at Scrum, the velocity calculation is sort of a formula where we plug in some data and then we get an answer. Maths is all about formulas, so they're deterministic. Of course, if you plug in the wrong data, you get the wrong result, so that's where you have to be careful. The second one is random, where we have different answers. They're all possibilities, but they're all identifiable. Most of the time when we're picking technology stacks or trying to find a library to use, we are in the area of random problems. Might take some time to identify them all, but we most definitely can do that. If I want to find a logging library in Python, I can actually identify them all with some effort. And the other one is indeterminate, which means that there are different answers. They're all possible, but not all of them are identifiable. And when we're talking about software design and architecture and domain modeling and everything domain-driven design is known for, basically we're always in this area of indeterminate. We cannot simply find all the answers to how to model something. It can be modeled in 1,000 ways. It's just not possible to identify them all. The second thing this model does is it looks at the role of fact and the role of judgment. The harder it becomes to identify all of them, the more we have to rely on judgment, and the more the role of fact actually goes down. So if I'm heavily relying on judgment to solve a problem, whereas if I'm in the first two and fact is there, I'm going to do this drastically different. Even random and indeterminate are different ways that I approach when I try to find a solution for it, because that role of judgment is just very differently. So that's the first model that I use to sort of see where are we at with this problem in this company, and what exactly are we trying to do here. Hint: if you're an architect, you're mostly in indeterminate there, so that's great. If you're a tech lead, maybe you need to pick a lot of tech stacks, or you're at random. Simplistic and deterministic are not often there in my line of work. And the other one I use is a different way to look at it. It's how is this problem behaving? At one point, you have, we have pain points. We have a bunch of calls we want to reach. We might even have solutions, but we don't actually know exactly what the problem is. We can't really pinpoint it down, which requires a different way of approaching it. Sometimes we have this goal and we just don't know how to reach it. We know that as this situation, we have a to-be situation when we're redesigning, but how we get there is actually a total mystery, which is a different type of problem to solve. And the reason that I put this in here is mostly for the last one. I love that one. We have a solution that we utterly love, and now we need to find a problem nobody ever had, because we want to use this solution. And it's also one I often see in companies. They go to conferences, they read tech news, and there's this new thing that they really want to try out. But at this point in time, there's actually not a problem that really needs that solution. So they create it anyway, which is a bit what happened with the Kanban scenario. They got tired of Scrum. They wanted to move to Kanban. They had a solution that they utterly loved, but there wasn't any real reason to do it. You could make that decision individually, but all the other teams were working with Scrum, so would go against it a bit. So they tried to find a problem for it. And so I think it's always good to know where exactly are we here. If I'm designing software, most of the time I have to find where are we now. If they don't know that anymore, where do we want to be? And then I have to find a path to actually go from the as is to the to be situation. So that's interesting to know there. And then I understand a bit sort of the essence of the problem. The other thing I already sort of hinted at is the definition of the problem, sometimes called the problem statement. Because that's often very fuzzy. If I ask someone what is domain-driven design, which is technically a simplistic problem, I will get different answers to it. How do we introduce domain-driven design into the company? But is that really the problem? Again, domain-driven design is very much a solution to something, not the actual problem. So how we make that statement, it actually changes a lot which solutions we come up with how we approach everything, the outcome that we're eventually are going to get. So it pays off to spend some time there as well. Now, the thing is, and that's very important, you don't have to agree on someone's definition of the problem, but you have to understand it. People have to make sure that it's clear. Sometimes people get into these discussions that, okay, yeah, but the bad quality of our tests is not the biggest priority right now. I understand, but do you understand what they think the problem is with the tests? And can we move forward with that? And give your opinion on that. And the fact that maybe you think something is another priority is a different discussion, and we don't need to have it right now. But you need clarity on what it is. And that is a very difficult thing to achieve. So the first pitfall of stating your problem is that you're too vague or you're just too broad. There's no real focus, which makes it a lot harder to actually find solutions for them. If we say, what should we do about our teams? It's like, yeah, but what exactly is wrong with the teams? Features are not delivering fast enough. There's conflict. There's a lot of things that could be wrong with that team that we need to fix. So that's just too vague to actually start digging into. And the other one, how can we fix our bad architecture? Is also no real focus in that statement. Why is the architecture bad? Or there certain areas inside that architecture that are worse? Or there certain pain points? Is any of them very urgent and on fire right now? Or some of them can just wait a few years before we tackle them? So there's no focus in the problem statement. But often, those are the type of things we still see discussed in meetings. The second is that the focus that is in it is actually misdirected. So your statement is too narrow in a way. Can we get our teams to deliver features faster? Sort of indicates that the problem is that features aren't being delivered fast enough. And it could be that if we zoom out, there's actually a completely different problem. Maybe things between business and software teams, maybe there's a problem there, but we're already focused on the development side. Actually, we're already focused on the features and how we can actually make them go faster. So the solutions we come up with might actually not fix the problem at all. And how can we make our developers write better tests? Already focuses that, well, the problem is actually our developers that aren't writing good tests there. So too narrow, and it sort of misdirects you because it doesn't really tell you what the actual problem is. We have two sort of side categories of that. One is assumption driven. There are a lot of assumptions in the way we frame a problem. How can we convince people to do domain-driven design? Assumes a lack of interest, and they have to be convinced. And maybe the fact that there's a lack of interest isn't a problem at all. Maybe there's a time constraint and things like that. So we have to try to frame that differently. Or how can we motivate our users to report bugs? Is the assumption that there is a lack in motivation from our users. But maybe reporting a bug is just so tedious that they don't do it. And they start out very motivated to report a bug, but they just give up along the way. But if you frame it like that, then again, the solutions you'll come up with is all about how can we motivate our users and not how can we actually improve so that they can do this faster. So it's not so tedious anymore. And the second one, as I already mentioned a few times, is problem statements that are solution driven. There's already a solution inside your problem statement. Do we use SQL or event sourcing? Both are solutions. Do we move to microservices? That's a solution. And as I mentioned, it will severely influence the outcome we'll get on how we actually state that problem. So it pays off to spend some time there. There are a few things that you can do. The first one is paraphrasing, which means that you keep the meaning of the problem, but you just use different words. If we have, how can we convince people to do domain-driven design? We can say, how can we make our team enthusiastic about domain-driven design? The assumption that they're not enthusiastic and that they need to be convinced is still in it, but we sort of slightly paraphrase it there so that it becomes a bit more positive, and we think about enthusiasm instead of convincing, which will offer us different solutions. The second one you can do is 180 degrees, which says it in name. We just completely go the opposite. If we say, how can we motivate our users to report a bug? We can say, how can we make it as hard as possible to report bugs? Which is the opposite of motivating our users to do it. We want to actively demotivate them. Now, this is not the statement you're actually going to find solutions for, but it does give you ideas on okay, how can we go from here? Or there are some things in that new statement that actually will allow us to define the problem a bit better. You can also broaden the focus if we're in that too narrow scenario. If we say, do we use SQL or event sourcing, we can broaden it up and say, how can we actually improve our data quality, which is a lot broader problem to solve than simply saying, well, which type of database are we going to use here? And the other one is redirect focus, which is that it will just pick something else, somehow related, but not quite related, and we'll go from there. So how can we fix our bad architecture? We can say, how can we increase the user experience? Because bad architecture leads to bad user experience, which is redirecting the focus still in the same area, but not entirely related anymore to that bad architecture. And then again, you can come up with different solutions. And the other one is my most favorite, which I do, is the why statement. As I mentioned in my story when I began. So you make a statement, how can we make our developers write better tests? and you ask why. Why would we want them to do that? Well, we're getting a lot of bug reports. And then out of the answer, you make a new statement. How can we reduce the bugs in our software? And then you say, why? Well, because our customers are dissatisfied with our products. So how can we increase customer satisfaction? Why? And then you just continue that. And then what you have is sort of an overview of things that are related. And you can find the problem perhaps a bit better there. And you can say, okay, we'll actually focus on increasing customers' satisfaction instead of writing better tests. And one of the things we'll have to do is, of course, make sure that bug reports go down. But at the same time, we're also focusing on other areas of our customer or user, and not just anymore on that writing better tests in our code. So that really helps to understand the problem a bit better there. Why is my favorite one. Why are you moving to Kanban? And then you try to find out what problem are people actually trying to solve, because just the statement, it might not give you that answer or might not give you the correct solutions. So once you understand the problem a bit better, what's next? And we solve it. That's what I said. We solve it. But how do we solve it? And that's sort of where I spent a lot of time with the decision making. So decision making theory to the rescue. Because even knowing the problem, it's still how are we actually going to approach solving it. Most of what I see in companies or meetings and discussions and opinions being shared, but there's no process, there's no structure there that actually does it. And so one of the first things I do is check, are all the elements of a decision actually present here? So we have a few elements that need to be there in order to make a good decision. And I'll walk through all of these right now. But first, a boring definition of what a decision actually is, although I don't think it's boring, but it's the one I work with. So a decision is a choice between two or more alternatives or options sometimes, that involves an irrevocable allocation of resources. And when I first sort of came across this definition, it really changed the way I looked at problems and how to solve them. First of all, what is an alternative? That's sort of one of the keywords in there. It's basically something that leads you to a different future. Because if we have solutions that will just have the same outcome, there's not really a decision to be made. If the future that we get is not that drastically different, then again, do I want to spend a lot of time here? So it has to lead to a different future. And the second thing is irrevocable allocation of resources. This comes from economics. So resources is defined as scarce and valuable time, money, energy, people. And what this basically means is that there's a cost in being wrong. And the question is, how do we know we made a decision? If I say that today that I'm going to climb the Mount Everest, I've decided that, I will get a lot of skeptical answers to that. But if I say I am going to climb the Mount Everest and I actually signed up for a climbing course, people might, already believe that a bit more. If I say I signed up for a climbing course, I bought my gear and my plane ticket is booked for a year from now, it still means people will actually think I made a decision to do that even more. So that changes this irrevocable allocation of resources changes how I look at a decision. The question becomes, there's a cost in being wrong, and am I willing to pay the cost to actually change this decision? So it's no longer this fixed point in time. For me, with the before the decision and after decision, it's more of a process. And until we reach the outcome, as long as I'm actually willing to pay the cost of the fact that I picked the wrong alternative, I can change it. So it's not set in stone anymore, and that gives you some flexibility. And also sort of stops endless discussions. If you say that right now we are actually not willing to pay this cost, so we're going to continue, then this is actually also very good. I already mentioned the elements a bit that need to be there. So the first one is the decision maker. Officially, it is said the person that has the authority to make the decision. But I adapted that a bit, and I also said the person who has the authority, the commitment, and the permission to make this decision. Authority is mostly about, in case you know that, explicit ranking, or they at the right level. Does the company actually give them the authority to make that? The second one is the commitment. Are they committed to actually solve this problem or not? Sometimes I see team leaders that sort of like are circling around it, and no one option is ever picked over the other, and things just sort of, go along. And that means that this person does have the authority, but they don't have the commitment to actually solve it. If you've ever been in a situation where people get angry at you for solving their problem, that's because you are very committed to do that, but you do not have the authority. And sometimes you don't have the permission. When you look at teams and team dynamics, if we look at implicit ranking, which is sort of how people view you, sometimes the people just don't think that this person should be the person to solve this problem. So they don't have the permission of everyone else, who it will affect does not give this person the permission. Decision-making theory states that there is only one decision maker, but there are other ways to approach this, of course. You can have a sort of a board that does the analysis for you, and then there's a final person making the decision. You can live under democratic rules and say that actually all decisions are deferred to the team, and I will not intervene unless they really can't figure it out. But in essence, there is just one. This is a lot of times that people don't really agree with it. If you want to know who it is, then just ask, who's this person? If we look at the hierarchy, who's the first person we come across that can utterly veto moving forward, that can override the team's decision? If we have a team lead, then for some decisions it will be the team lead. If we also have a technical lead, then for some decisions it will be the technical lead that actually block and just override. Be careful, because that will not be perceived very well. The second one is that there needs to be a frame, which is the view of the decision maker on the problem, which is basically the problem statement where we just came from. If you don't spend enough time there, it will get a bit messy in meetings sometimes. Sometimes they were talking about, we want to improve the quality of our tests, and then when someone says, well, shouldn't we just change frameworks? And that means that the view that you had on this problem, someone changed it, allowed or not allowed. But we're discussing a different thing. So if you end up in a lot of meetings and you walk away and it was like, what the hell did we actually discuss? Then look whether or not that frame is in place and there's good problem statement. You can also it's called a frame in decision making because you can sort of enlarge it and pull it down. Do we fix the pain points of our architecture, or do we create a new architecture? If we do create a new architecture, do we focus on a part of our software system, or do we actually just focus on the whole software system? Do we also change the teams? This is all that framing on the problem and how you're going to address it, and how you're going to find alternatives for your problem so that you can make a decision. So it's very important to have this in place. There's something called the reframing canvas. Like if you're not entirely sure, this will sort of help you figure it out a bit. Looking at who's involved and what do we think the problem actually is. Are we missing something? Is there something in this context we have not really thought about? What goal are we actually trying to pursue by solving this problem? Are there any bright spots? Are there any positive exceptions? If we say that teams don't deliver features fast enough, is there any team that actually does not have this problem right now? Look in the mirror. What do I do to create this problem? What is my role in it? Not the easiest thing to do, but self-reflection. I wrote software before I became an architect, and sometimes I wrote very bad tests. So if our test quality is not good, then I have a role in that problem, and I need to address it. And take other perspectives. What problems are other people trying to solve? If you feel there's a problem between product management and software, and you want to introduce domain-driven design to solve that, to collaborate more with product side, then you need to think, what actually are they trying to solve? Which type of problems do they have, and what are they trying to solve? And maybe I can make a problem statement that they can actually understand and agree with. Maybe I can change something on their side, which will make it easier, meaning that maybe I don't introduce domain-driven design, but we do something else. We use some of their tools, and it will actually help us there as well. So it gives you sort of a different perspective again on the frame. I already mentioned alternatives is sometimes options. There is always more than one option. There is. Not deciding is always an option. So keeping the status quo as is always an option, even though you don't like it, maybe. So there are at least always two, because we can keep going as things are, or we can change. And how we can change, there are multiple ways to do that well. But how can we figure out these alternatives? When I talk about technology, I already said I have a slightly different approach, because it's a random problem. So we can actually find them all. We have all possible answers, and they can be identified. So what you do there is a key of divergence and convergence. So divergence means I'm actually going to just name all of them up, whether or not they're actually a good solution. I'm going to put them there as an option. And then you're going to start converge, which is I'm going to eliminate some of these, because I don't want to have, I also don't want to think about 8 or 9 things all this time. I'm going to pick the top 3. I'm going to pick the 3 most popular to actually dig a bit deeper into, or I'm going to take the 3 favorite of the team. So then we actually eliminate them again, and we start doing the analysis on those options that are still there. When it comes to software design, not all identifiable. What I do is often I generate 2, and then I assemble a 3rd from the previous 2 designs, so that I actually end up with 3 options. Why 3? Because if you only have 2, you can get an us versus them dynamic. which is not very helpful to make good decisions. So I want to try to avoid that. And by having a third, it can't be an us versus them anymore, because people spread their opinion. So that sort of, depending on what I'm trying to do, is it random or indeterminate, I do a different approach of actually finding my options. Then the other thing that needs to be there is a preference on one of the alternative or one of the options. Because if you don't care which kind of future you're going to get, again, there is no decision to be made. I might as well just take a dart and throw it at one and go with that, because I honestly just don't care. So you need to have a preference. You always have a preference for whatever reasons you have. And making that explicit when you're analyzing it is saying that, like, I used to work in projects that had a monolith and that didn't go very well. So my preference actually goes to microservices. Is a completely different situation that's saying, well, actually, monoliths just don't work, and you shouldn't even try to do this. It's just that you have a preference due to past experience for something else. So if someone says that's not an option for me, what they're basically saying is, I strongly dislike it, because it definitely is an option. It even helps to put some options there that you severely dislike and dig deeper into them, because you might prove yourself wrong. So it's always possible. We also need information. I often get how much information? Well, if you start digging for information on all your alternatives, how do they work? And it doesn't really change your mind all that much anymore. The information isn't worth much. And so you should stop digging for more knowledge on it. So keep going until you sort of notice that, well, this doesn't really change my mind anymore. If we have event sourcing and they say, how deep do we actually dig into it? Well, if I'm there to sort of get the first redesign going, and there's at some point we're still modeling, but I noticed that, well, this is probably not going to change my mind anymore on how to find my bounded context here, then you can stop modeling. And the last thing is that you need some sort of logic in which my preferences, my information, and my alternatives are being poured, that will actually narrow it down to a single option that we can then start implementing and hopefully have a good outcome. Depending on the situation, I either use heuristics or some sort of analysis. This is the longest definition I have for you. Basically, if you don't know what a heuristic is, a very simple definition, it's a rule of thumb. A bit more of a elaborate definition is the one from Billy von Kuhn, which I use for finding bounded context. A heuristic is anything that provides a plausible aid or direction in the solution of a problem, but is in its final analysis unjustified, incapable of justification, and fallible. It is anything that is used to guide, discover, and reveal a possibly but not necessarily correct way to solve a problem. This basically means that it's a quick way to get to an answer, but there is no guarantee it is the correct answer. Heuristics are not only used in software design, they're also used on the ER. For example, to determine whether or not someone is having a heart attack, they actually use a heuristic, which is a checklist. And if you have 3 out of 4 or something like that, they assume you have a heart attack. And it doesn't yield worse results than if they actually have to do a deeper analysis. So that's the good news, but it can fail. If you don't know anything, here's a good tip. Here we have all these laws. I think the most famous one is Murphy's laws and Parkinson's law. But in that category, sometimes there's a razor behind it. And eraser is something that eliminates options quickly. So if you ever see Occam's razor or Hanlon's razor, which I think are two somewhat well-known erasers, they're there to actually eliminate options quickly. Two examples. I think don't attribute something to malice when it can be easily explained by stupidity. It means that you can throw out all the options that actually talk about malice or ill intent, like the software developer just don't want to get better. You can already throw that out because that indicates a malice from their side. Okay, and when we talk about software design, if we have two competing models, but they have equal explanatory power, which means that my model is actually explaining the problem we're trying to solve equally well, then go for the simplest solution. Okay? So those things are very handy. I have a heuristics diary where I have a whole lot of design heuristics. I also have the general heuristics, these razors, because I can apply them in other parts of my life as well, if I want to eliminate options rather quickly. Yeah? Now, if I don't have it, what I do then is sort of compare options a bit better. Once I eliminated some, I do want to compare them a bit. So what I do is this pro-con fixed list. So I have my options, I fill it in for each option, and then I have a better understanding of the trade-off, because we say everything is a trade-off, but what actually does that mean? Well, if I use this pro-con fixed list, it means that I will get everything from option 1 and I will get nothing from option 2, and that is the trade-off I'm making by picking one over the other. The fixed there is, everybody knows a pro-con. The fixed there is the interesting one for me, because that means that we look at something negative and we're trying to see how can we make it have less impact? How can we neutralize it a bit? For example, if event sourcing is one of the things that we want to choose, and one of the negative sides is that none of us have experience in actually using this technology, then a fix is that we get a training or we organize some lunch and learning things, so that the fact that we have no knowledge of this just isn't such a huge impact anymore. Then for technology, again, so if we're going to the analysis route instead of the heuristics route, something I do is pair ranking. We have all these things that we're sort of trying to get. How does this library perform? Is it easy to read? Can I easily add something to it? Can I learn it? Is it easily to test? Does it have practical examples? So whatever you find important in picking a technology, I write them all down, and then I use pair ranking to actually get an order in there. So pair ranking just means that I pick the one, say performance, for example, and I compare them to each one of my individual lists, and then I say which one I find more important. Performance or readability, performance or extensibility, performance or learning ability. And that way I can just count and I can give them somewhat of an order there. And then I pour that into a matrix. If I say readability is the most important one, I add a weight to it and I put that weight higher. And so I have 100% to divide over all the things, over all the criteria I want to sort of analyze a technology by, and that sort of gives me a matrix. And then I go actually digging to each one of those criteria. How readable is this? How easy will other people be able to learn this? How simple? Is it still active on GitHub? And I sort of give it a score. And in that, I have a final ranking, which actually says which is the one we should go for. In this analysis I did, it was for an F# web API library, and Suave came out very well in it, so I could go for that. Okay? And it's like, yeah, okay, but that costs a lot of time. So if you have limited knowledge and limited time, use heuristics. If you have limited knowledge, but you have time, you can do an analysis. And they say, okay, but how much time do I have to invest in it? Well, that depends a bit. From an economical perspective, I can easily spend $1 million for $1 billion decision. That's a no-brainer. If I'm trying to redesign a software system, I'm allowed to spend time there. Because again, we have that random and indeterminate problem. So the bigger role judgment is a part of it. So the more important judgment actually becomes, the more time I actually want to spend there analyzing this problem. When it comes about facts, and if that's the most important thing, I don't need to spend a lot of time there at all. I can move on really quickly, which is also a way to explain to other people with a set of categories. Like we have an indeterminate problem, which means that our judgment is big, which means that we should spend some time on analyzing all of this instead of rushing it again, instead of rushing through this redesign. And I know that there are fires, but we can look at temporary pain points that we can make that all a bit better for people. And then we can spend some time on actually redesigning this. Another way to look at it is how reversible is this decision. They talk about, at Amazon, they talk about a one-way and a two-way door, and I have seen this model adapted at people, in companies for teams, depending on the type of decision they have to make. They have to sort of get permission, or they need other people on board, or they can decide this within the team on their own. But basically what this means, a one-way door is irreversible. You walk through it, you can never go back. And reversible means that I can actually walk back to the decision if it turns out I picked the wrong alternative. The good thing is that with my definition of what a decision is, where it becomes this process, not a lot of decisions are irreversible anymore. It becomes about, am I willing to pay this cost? And why do I want to pay this cost to change it? Instead of, we can never change this anymore. It's set in stone down. So when we look at software design, short from actually bankrupting your company, there are not a lot of decisions that are irreversible inside a company. If it ceases to exist, then you basically did something irreversible. Anything else can be dealt with, which is great, because it becomes a lot less stressful to make decisions, because I am allowed to change my mind if I gain more information. Because we never have all the information available that we need, especially when it's about judgment. Any decision is made under a certain level of uncertainty. The question is, how much uncertainty is there right now? Do I spend more time investigating so that I am more certain of which way to go, or do I spend less time knowing that I'll have to pay a cost later? Because facts or information might show up that we just don't have right now. But again, I just pay the cost. That might be painful, but we move on. So it makes it a lot easier to deal with uncertainty as well. Then there are a few things, sort of categories on a decision. A decision can be easy or hard. If I want to order an ice cream, and I wouldn't have to choose a flavor. Well, that's an easy decision. If I have to redesign an entire software system, that's definitely a bit harder. If I have to set the goals for the next 10 years of this company, well, that's even harder than anything else. So if you're trying to make easy decisions, heuristics, not that makes it good. If I'm making a hard decision, again, I want to spend more time there, make sure that the uncertainty goes down by getting more information, so that we better understand what exactly is it that we want. Another way to look at a decision is to ask yourself, is it reactive or proactive? Reactive means that something happened and now I have to make a decision because of it. Proactive means that I want something to change and I'm going to make a decision because of that. I got fired, so I need a new job is a reactive decision. I'm not enjoying my company anymore and I want a different job is a proactive decision. And it's important to know in which one of these two scenarios you exactly are. Because if you're in a reactive mode, could be that there are a lot of emotions because you had to react to something. It also means that the time you have available is often a lot more limited than in proactive decisions. And the sad part is that when it comes to software redesign or software designs, when I go to companies, I've noticed that they're far more in the reactive decision mode than that they are in the proactive decision mode, which means that even if they want to redesign, there's still a limit. People get tired of working in a horrible code base, so people start quitting. And so the way you approach the whole analysis will be drastically different. So it's always better to try to move it to more proactive decision making when it comes to software redesign and architecture than to stay in this reactive decision making environment, because it will change how you can deal with it. And a decision, as last, it can also be good or bad. I'm going to explain this with a simple scenario, which I think has nothing to do with software, but sort of makes it easier for people to understand what I mean. Laura has been drinking a lot, but she decides to drive home anyway. So that's what she decides. She loses control over her steering wheel and hit a tree and is injured. If I ask people, is this a good or a bad decision? Without a doubt, people say this is a very bad decision. It's very clear. Again, Laura is drunk, but she still decides to drive home. But she gets home safe without any accidents. If I ask people, is this a good or a bad decision? Most of them will say, well, this is a bad decision. You just got lucky. That she wasn't in an accident, because it's really bad when you're driving drunk. But there's an opposite of that. Laura doesn't drink at all. She drives home herself, and she gets home safe without any accidents. Good or bad, people say, yeah, that's a good decision. That's what we want. But it's this last one that makes it tricky. Laura drinks, doesn't drink all evening, and she drives home, but she gets into a car accident, and she sort of injures herself again. Is this a good or a bad decision? And that is where people start to understand the difference between the decision and the outcome of your decision. Because her decision to drive home was good. She hadn't been drinking. She followed all the rules. It was a good decision. It just had a bad outcome. And that is quite difficult for people to understand, that if I say you're not making good decisions, I don't mean that you have bad outcomes. I mean that the way you get to a course of action is actually not a good way to get there. This means that a good decision does not always guarantee a good outcome. It also means, luckily for us, that a bad decision does not guarantee a bad outcome. So in that scenario, we can say that a decision has a good or a bad outcome. It can be a good or a bad decision, depending on how you approach making the decision. If one of those elements just isn't there, you didn't make a good decision already. If you don't have a good problem statement, you didn't make a good decision. Doesn't mean you had a bad outcome necessarily. And this is very difficult to talk about because often when we're asked, was it a good decision? People actually talk about the outcome of the decision. And there's actually a term for that. It comes from the poker world. It is called resulting. And it means that you confuse the quality of the decision with the quality of the outcome. And so you look at that outcome there. And so if you want to make a good decision, there's a lot more that you need to do. And I can understand if you say that, yeah, okay, but why should I bother doing anything of that? I'm doing fine. I have good outcomes. I really, why should I change any of this with any of the things you just mentioned here? Well, first of all, for clarity, for everyone involved, sitting down and sort of creating the decision, looking at the problem statement, figuring out the options, visualizing the analysis, or writing down the heuristics that you might use, means that you get clarity of thought for yourself, which means that in the future, if I want to understand why I made the decision that I made, I actually know it a lot better. If you use something like architecture decision records, where we can just take that pro-con fix list and add that to the documentation, we have a decent problem statement. We sort of described everything. It also means that other people understand how you made the decision. Because if people don't understand how it was made, they might not be so willing to just go along with it. So it helps you to explain all of it. It gives you clarity. And secondly, consistency. I said it's a skill that you will need to develop, some new tools and techniques that you will need to learn, but you will create consistency in how you make decisions. And so maybe the first few times that you do this, you will slow down. But over time, you will find yourself making decisions in a similar way. You'll optimize the process. You'll look at it and saying, is this a good way to approach this, or do we need to tweak this process of a decision a bit? Which means that if we have a similar process, we do the chances that we'll get a good outcome increase. They're never guaranteed, but they do increase if we take the time to think a bit more on how we make a decision. And so that is why I'm trying to give people tools and techniques to get better processes inside their teams and inside their companies, so that overall the probability of getting a good outcome increases, and that if we swap from a monolith to microservices, we just don't end up again in a big ball of mud, which is now distributed, which is sort of a worse place to be in general. And so that is what I had for today. Thank you for joining me. If you have any feedback, please let me know. And now I also have some time for questions, if there are any.
I saw a hand raised, so whoever that was, please go ahead.
No, I raised my hand by accident. I just want to say it was yet again a great talk, so thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, I kind of had a question. I also kind of think it was awesome. Thank you very much. And I really enjoyed, especially this kind of the more kind of how to make good and bad decisions, and I really like that resulting as a concept. One question I had was on the source for this definition that you had, and I put it in a sticky earlier. Oh yeah, on the decision maker. So you said there's the decision maker theory says that there is one decision maker, and I'd love to understand where that comes. What you mean by theory, and where can I read more about that? And the context of that question is about kind of how that fits with the centralized decision making for software architecture. I mean, in the end, even if you follow the advice process, it's like anyone can make a decision, but it's still talking about one person. So I'd love to hear your thoughts first on source and also then on elaborate on that.
I'll add the source. There are a few. I've read the different books and they don't agree on that single decision maker. So I want to make that perfectly clear to start from. This comes from an economy course in Stanford. A friend of mine took it, and sort of the whole reason I pulled into decision making. They do teach that in some other industries. Although the analysis part, the logic in economics is often about probability, which I didn't think was any useful for our software industry that we're in. I tried to find easier techniques and faster techniques to do it, because often we're not about the $1 billion decisions, right? And in that, in their model, they say there's a single decision maker. I think it's called the foundation of decision analysis, but I'll write a link to it. It is, however, it's a Stanford University course, so the book is quite expensive. I believe it's over €100 when I purchased it way back when. And there are some other sources that I can also add here that don't have that in their model, that there needs to be a single decision maker. It's just that for me, when I read about this definition, that changed my view the most. So that's sort of why I picked this model over any other model that I came across on what is a decision. And then with centralized and decentralized, if we have an architect on top, they're the decision maker. We understand that, right? And they throw it over the wall, or maybe not throw it over the wall because people do a good job, but there's one person with the veto, and we know this. I think if we go to decentralized, there is still that person responsible, still that architect there that can veto it if needed. It's just that the way what the decision maker decided is to do it in a more decentralized way, meaning they're more of an advisor than the decision maker. But at the end of the road, I would say that if a team or multiple teams decide on a certain architecture, they could still veto it. It would cause a huge amount of conflict because it goes against the values behind decentralized architecture decision making. But I still think the veto stays the same with the architects. They just never use it anymore.
Cool. I love that. That they just it's like just hearing different things, and I do wonder if people in those situations really do adhere to the fact that it's a veto that is never used, but that power is there. But I think it's really interesting, this whole area on how we can make decisions happen. Sorry, I saw Enfer, you had a question.
Yeah, it's very related actually to what you just asked. But at my company, we're actually moving away from having centralized decision makers, as in we have architects, and we're thinking of getting rid of architects. I mean it in a more positive way than I expressed it right now, but move the decision making more towards the team and have them come up with the architectural decisions.
Yes.
And so yeah, I'm really, the last weeks I've been thinking about, and especially now that I've seen the talk as well, you said again, there's one decision maker. How do you in practice come up? Because it does sound like even if you have decentralized decision making, you still need someone who makes the final decision. How do you come up with that person if there's no clear person who has more permission or has more authority than other people in the group?
It depends, right? If you said we're getting rid of the architects, So if you implement a decentralized process for architecture, which I'm all for, by the way, I find it very fascinating, and I do agree. I wrote an entire book that says that an architect becomes more of a facilitation of design instead of actually being the designer. So I think moving in that direction for companies is good. But still, architecture is a sort of there's a lot of knowledge there, and it's a skill, and it's something that grows over time. So I think you still need architects in the sense that you need advisors there, and you need people that sort of push this in the right direction, which means facilitating the decision instead of dominating the decision. So they're still very much there. They go to all different teams. They give advice whenever needed. They can facilitate it. Their roles have changed. But if we look at power structure, if an architect honestly believes that a team is doing the completely wrong thing, I still think he would have the power to go to, I don't know, higher management or CTO and says, look, this team is making this decision, is going for this alternative. This will be very bad for us. We need to stop it. So there is still a veto power there. It's just that in decentralized, you never want to use it because it has severe consequences if you actually do it. So that's sort of how I look at it. And I don't know if you mean getting rid of your architects means that you're actually going to, fire all of them. I hope not, because they're still valuable, even in decentralized.
Yeah, I don't. Sorry, go.
Can I ask a small follow-up question? Because I noticed in your answer, you focus a lot, or at least that's what I interpret, on the veto part.
Mm-hmm.
What my problem mostly is getting to a decision, not vetoing a bad decision, but getting to a decision as a group. And
yes,
that's where I see the struggle. That's why I see the value of having one decision maker. They can just say, we've discussed long enough, let's go with this.
Definitely. So going for democratic decision making, it's a topic all on its own. There's something called deep democracy, which is something you might dig deeper into. It's part of the book. We discuss how you can make deep democratic decisions, and it's a technique that sort of gets you to a single alternative, so boil it down and sort of gets you to that part where you can actually start thinking about how are we going to get to this new architecture instead of which one are we going to get. So I think deep democracy is a topic you might find interesting. It's about getting all the people, including the minority votes, people that disagree with the most popular alternative, sort of get them on the same page and come up with an option, picking an option where everyone can get behind. But it's more time, more energy, democratic decisions. So the cost is a lot higher.
I just added a couple of links, Amber. So with Kenny and Andrew Harmon-Lowe, we've been doing a series on stories of facilitating software architecture, which are all tending towards decentralization. And it kind of, a lot of it kind of bases itself on the advice process, where the advice process is anyone can make a decision as long as they have kind of got the advice from people affected by it and people that know by it, which kind of answers your question of who's doing the decisioning. And that it kind of leans towards a person, which is saying, I'm gonna, how about our team uses Freya or whatever. And they, as long as they consult these people and they include all this information on an ADR, they can proceed with it. And it relies on kind of the social construct that people don't do reckless decisions. And maybe you already read about this, and maybe I'm telling you stuff you already know probably. But I think you might find a lot of nuance in all the links that I just sent and if not, please let us know so we add stuff to the stories because obviously there's something missing.
Yeah, thank you. I'll have a look at that.
What about the rest of you? Einar, you're you're the question person. You're someone with questions all the time, but
And the
also
question
other
factory.
Yes, you are actually.
Yeah, I think this may be a little bit related to this. How do you reach decision across teams with autonomous teams? So I was discussing with some other people. They had two teams that were sort of autonomous cross-functional teams, the ideal in that sense. And they were supposed to create some integration, but they were also at the same time busy and delivering a lot of value separately. And then they didn't really agree on, well, what kind of integration pattern should we use? Should this be asynchronous? Should this be synchronous? So one team wanted one thing and the other team wanted another thing. And it sort of got to a stalemate where nothing happened because they, as a result of this sort of conflict, they didn't prioritize it. And then there's a question like, should they prioritize it? Because the teams are both busy, right? So someone thinks that at some point this integration should happen, and they're not really motivated to reach a decision. But someone in the organization obviously want them to integrate. So
Someone does. The software system wants to be integrated, right? Because
yes.
else there's no point in writing software.
Right,
yeah. So first of all is conflict resolution. So that's what I would start doing first, because right now the topic is no longer discussable, and that's due to the conflict. So what you need to do is get the conflict out of it, or at the very least, make it back in a stage where it's discussable, where people don't get too angry. So that's the first thing I would do. The second thing I would do, and it may be Einar, due to constraints here, I don't fully understand the situation. But the whole, do we do async or sync? I already feel that I might dig deeper into that problem because it's an all or nothing with just two options. And so I would give these people other options, like, are there parts of this integration that would benefit from synchronous, or there are parts that would benefit from asynchronous? And I design different models that have both of those aspects in it. And then probably the concerns that they have, the designs that I make, the concerns that they have, if the team is against synchronous, there are reasons for that. And if they're against asynchronous, there are reasons for that. How can I, with my design, mitigate that? Or there are parts that I can make synchronous because that's very important for team B and they would prefer a synchronous one. Or there are parts I can make asynchronous because that's important for team A. And that would sort of give them a balanced solution they will feel comfortable with. So move them away from the us versus them and move them away from there's only either or, and I have multiple options, which is a combination of both of those things that you have.
Yeah, just to follow up, I don't really have many details because it was a discussion on the Slack and not an organization that I've been a part of or anything like that. So I think there could be a combination of a lot of things. One thing is sort of like the purely technical, what's the best solution here kind of thing. And then there might be like programmer egos and historic reasons. And so to what extent it's really like a technical discussion or a technical discussion that's a proxy for really a social conflict, I have no idea. So I originally sort of suggested threatening them with an architect to come in to make a decision that no one liked, or to flip a coin, something like that. Because as you said, there are probably reasons for preferring one or the other, and both probably have benefits and both would probably work. So in a sense, it's the stalemate that's the problem. But yeah, I don't really know to what extent it's a technical problem or a social problem or both. So yeah,
I love Gien's, your initial instinct was like, how to solve the conflict first, because that's actually the problem. I thought that was completely the I felt like, okay, actually, can you talk to each other? Because this is going to be a problem that will not just affect that integration. It will affect the system in that area. And it has those kind of ramifications forever. So 100% agree.
Yeah, and if they have to work together for other things besides this integration, that conflict is still there, right? It's not because we
Absolutely.
have a problem to solve that conflict goes away all of a sudden. So you have to solve the conflict. Make it back to a discussable. Well, I hope it's not too bad. There are actually stages of conflict. It's in the book. I would have to look it up, but it's about conflict escalation. And so first you can figure out where exactly inside the conflict you are, and then you can see how can we now bring it down a bit more, basically.
So to what extent is then an architect is like a psychologist?
Oh, to the same extent that a consultant is.
Yeah.
Because I was not very good with people when I was younger. I had to invest a lot of time in understanding people as a whole and how they function. But part of my consultant is coaching, and coaching is psychology. And I think an architect, where there used to be I don't want to use ivory tower because it's such a horrible metaphor and it is not very positive, but there were silos there, and architect made the decision. And I think as they move to advisors, in the part of where they have to be about psychology will also increase, because then you have to deal with opinions and emotions when you advise instead of make the decision. It's a good skill to develop, and it can be developed, by the way. That's the good news. All right, so maybe I can ask you a question. It's the first time I'm giving this talk. I'm always looking for feedback. So if there are parts you really liked, or if there are parts that were unclear, you don't have to say it out loud. You can maybe take a post-it, and I'll make a frame on the board. I don't know how this board works. Andrea will make a frame on the board of the Eldorado, because I have never used this before.
So there's no frames. You need to we can just go somewhere to the top. It's quite minimal, this board, but this is kind of why I like it. It's just very, very lightweight. But someone was saying that they couldn't see the images, which is kind of not great. That never happened to me before. But what we can do is, if you follow me for a second, just put the square here, where it says here.
Yeah.
And this is the link for those of you that weren't here before. Also, you have some feedback on the chat. I sent to you on Discord. So if you're here, can everyone just grab a sticky and put it there, just so that we know that you're all able to? I just copied there. Control D to copy, to duplicate. There you go. So if someone can't do it, then you just signal in some way. Hello, works. Okay, we have at least 3. But I see more people here. Ew, someone escaped. It's like, no, leave me feedback. Right.
It's why I still love doing meetups, because you have a bit of a more in-person connection with people, and you can ask for better feedback there.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, now instead of just saying hi, so what was your ask, Gien?
Parts you really liked, where you even thought, "Oh, I wish you would spend some more time on this," and parts you thought that were confusing, that you didn't understand all that well yet. So I know where to focus my attention to improve the talk, and I really appreciate it.
Is there a recording of the talk? Because I sort of stumbled in late, so
Yeah, the talk has been we've been broadcasting it on YouTube. So if you just go to Virtual DDD, like literally the homepage
okay.
would be the last one, and that will give
Okay,
you a link
perfect.
to the YouTube.
Great.
So if what about you, Gien? What did you like about your talk? And you just gave it for the first time, so you have also feelings. You're allowed.
I am allowed to have feelings. Oh, if I had known that when I was 10 years old.
I know.
No, I mean, like the part of the decision, because what's a good decision and how do I look at a decision? I mean, I wrote it down for the book. So explaining that whole part, I'm pretty confident in. I did notice one of my slides was at the wrong place, because normally I talk about it in a facilitating software design sort of environment, and it has fits different in the story. So I'm very confident in that. But talking more about the problem restatement is something I haven't done all that often yet. So I think I'll have to put some more work in there, because they're interesting models and there's interesting techniques. But I'm not sure I'm doing it right now. Okay. And I'm not sure about my opening story. I think maybe I should find something that actually just takes you through the entire problem restatement. That might be better than having individual examples all the time. That's my idea of it. That's my feeling. But I did hit all the notes I wanted to hit with problem statement, so that's good as well.
Yeah, also it's such a big topic, isn't it?
It is, because I haven't talked about clarity. Like you can dig completely into clarity. That's a complete topic on its own, in that analysis and how to do all of that. I have a talk on the tech. It's called reducing risk in picking a technology. It's about those F#, and that's a complete talk on its own. The analysis of finding your options, finding that design, and then sort of facilitating that process. It's an entire talk on its own. And then sort of who is the decision maker, who can decide what, how do I organize that within a company, how do I make sure it's all known, is also a complete topic on its own. So there's a lot there.
I like this feedback bit. I love it that you requested it because I kind of think it might be a bit. It's like, now we're going to give you feedback, but you're actually really looking for feedback.
Yes. I have my first keynote ever. I do this as a keynote in New Crafts. I'm very excited about it. But it's also the first time I'm ever really talking about this. So I really appreciate it that you're taking some time to write this all that, because I want to get it right as a first keynote.
It's going to be amazing.
I hope so.
We just saw like the first version of it. It's like it's already great, so it can only get better.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, does anyone have any more comments or questions or something you want to share to this nice small group that is really into decision making? Why are you crying, Anna?
Oh.
I'm doing this sort of like old person on the internet thing. I'm talking when I'm muted and I'm clicking the wrong buttons. Yeah, I just wanted to say that my FOMO for Newcraft just doubled. Because I won't be there, and yeah, I'd like to see that keynote. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at least I'm like literally on the other side of the world. I mean, you have no excuse, Anna.
I know.
Anyway, if there's nothing else, I'd like to thank again Gien and all of you for coming here and making this like a really, really great way to learn about decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, and I'll see everyone around.
See you next time. Bye. Stop streaming. Okay. Hey.
Still have some copying the feedback from the